What was the video I did afterwards? Oh, it was the Brazilian Megaman comic. So a lot of people asked with this one about, like, where do you even find this stuff? And I've been a fan of Mega Man my entire life. Since I was a kid, one of the most influential videos that, like, really got me into gaming as, like, a craft, as, like, an art form was Ego Raptor's sequelitis on Mega Man X. Like, Mega Man X versus Mega Man Classic. Those videos, that video specifically was super, super influential. I already thought Mega Man was cool because I liked robots and sci-fi stuff. And I loved the idea of, like, oh, you beat a boss and, like, you get to steal their power and that. And that was always super rad to me. I've always loved, like, highly themed characters. I mean, Mega Man might be the start of my love of highly themed characters. And so Mega Man's, like, a very important part of my childhood, but my life in general, because it's like, I don't know, it's a big part of it's very near and dear to my heart as a series. And when you're really into something, well, you just kind of get familiar with all the weird stuff. You just kind of get familiar with lots of odd little, like, this exists kind of thing. And I've known about this forever, like, since I was a little kid. Like, it's just one of those things. It's like, hey, you know, there's, like, a weird Brazilian Mega Man comic that's, like, officially licensed, and it's, like, not based on the games at all, and there's a bunch of, like, weird nudity and, like, violence, and it's just super off the rails. And it's just one of those things. It's like, you know, this would be really interesting. And I honestly thought more people knew about it, but I guess that's just, you know, my biased, skewed perspective. I thought more people knew about it, but they apparently did not, because this was a big surprise to a lot of people. So I want to talk about, like, one of the big inspirations for this video in particular. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to have do like a group reading of this comic book, because I thought it would be fun, and I wanted to get, like, my first reaction to it and, like, my friends' reactions, and I wanted to, like, riff on it. And a lot of that was inspired by this YouTube channel that I was a big fan of in high school called Soot House. And so Soot House was what Soot House was that it was a group of these British friends, I believe, and basically what they would do is they would just get into, like, a Discord call, and then there would be a theme for the video that they were recording, and it would be like weird Yahoo Answers posts or weird WikiHow articles or something like that, or, like, guess what the WikiHow article is based off of the images. And then they would just kind of, like, go along and, like, riff. And there was the main guy who would host it. His name was Wilbur. And he would, like, send images, and then they would sort of riff on it, and then it was all edited together with, like, different colored, on just, like, a blank background, or, like, this sort of, like, gray background with like some animation or something. It was, like, a very, like, moderate amount of animation, just to have some motion on the screen, and then like images for, like, you know, showing what they were reacting to and talking about, and then like the different colored text for each member popping up as they would speak. I loved Soot House. Those videos were funny as shit. Back when I was in high school, like, I want to say that, unfortunately, they were only active from, like, 16 to, like, 18, something like that. But their videos were great. I loved them, and they were decently popular too. And then suddenly they just stopped uploading, and it just sort of turns out, I don't know if there was any behind the scenes drama or something, but they all just kind of went their separate ways for the most part. And Wilbur is now a, like, Minecraft YouTuber. I think he does stuff with Dream. He's like Wilbur Soot now is what he goes by, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not really interested in that, but I loved Soot House. And so this video was, like, those parts of, like, the live reading parts of the Mega Man comic, like, two-parter, was heavily inspired by it's like literally me riffing on their style pretty much. And I was actually really happy with how that turned out. I wanted to get more people in, but in our little friend group, there was just, like, people who had, like, busy schedules. People were just going through stuff and they couldn't be around. And they were doing stuff, couldn't be around. And it ended up with me, Kat, and Shrew. And then later our friend Will joined after Shrew left or had to go to bed. And but I'm really happy with how it ended up. I think that... excuse me. I don't usually like doing two-parters because the drop-off... excuse me. The drop-off is, like, insane in viewership for the most part, and there is a little bit of a drop-off, but not as much, actually. Not as much as I was sort of expecting. The first episode has, like, 2,200 views. The second has 1,800. Not a huge discrepancy. And... yeah, it was definitely, like, a fascinating thing to go and read it myself, because... actually having the context and like, okay, how does all this fit together? What is this actually about? Because I'd only ever known it through just these weird random screenshots and stuff like that from the comic and just basically hearsay about it. So actually going through it myself and learning about it and reading it and actually trying to figure out what the fuck is supposed to be happening is... It was fun. It was a frustrating experience in many ways. Because, like, oh my god, it's a mess. But there's a lot of really interesting stuff that to touch on. Like, I mean, the time it was created in, like, Japanese, like, Brazilian, like manga, like, the influences that manga had in Brazil in the 90s, the way that it was made with, like, this volunteer work, all of the cultural references that were thrown in, all the political stuff that was thrown in. Very educational for me in many ways. I learned about, like the Cangaceiros and that was like that was actually really fascinating. I'm surprised I'd never heard of that. Like, that's not I don't know how big like the Brazilian population is in the US, but that is like not a very well known thing. And it's weird because it feels like obvious. It feels like, how the fuck has there not been like a big movie about this or something like that? and I know that there have been movies and shows, and there's been stuff in Brazil, but like I don't know what that stuff's like real exposure outside of the country is. I'm like, how have I never heard of this at all? Like, this seems so obvious to adapt into a story. It's so cool. And I got, some comments from, like, Brazilian viewers who I was like, okay, I tried to be, I don't know, respectful, or I tried to understand sort of the Brazilian perspective a little bit of what was going on. I didn't want to be condescending or anything towards it, which I think it would be really easy to when you're looking at something this like scrappy and it's so easy, I feel like, from an American perspective to just look at like everything south of us and think of it as just this like fucking poverty land. But I wanted to avoid any kind of like, I don't know, anything that even kind of like resembled that. I tried to be like, I have a surprising number of Hispanic viewers, and I think that's something that's kind of weird but kind of cool. And I sort of kind of wanted to think about, like, I don't know, I wanted to just have I wanted to like make fun of the book but be respectful to Brazilian culture, and especially like what I learned about it, and I hope that's what I was able to accomplish. And from the comments, I think I got a comment that, they were like, hey, you actually explained the Cangaceiro thing really well. And I was like, I was very proud of that, actually, because I just learned about it when I was researching for the video. So the fact that I was able to describe it decently and hopefully impart to like maybe a non-Brazilian audience or someone who doesn't know about it, that like, hey, this is a cool thing. This is a cool part of Brazilian history. Yeah, so like what was also funny is the amount of comments I got from Brazilian people who had never heard of this and unfortunately who were maybe like felt ashamed of it. If you're Brazilian and you learned about it, don't be ashamed. Do not be ashamed. First of all, I really appreciate that book for what it is, and I think in the second part I tried to get that across in my kind of concluding thoughts. I tried to express like my appreciation for what I thought it represented. But like there is just as much shitty, embarrassing American shit. Like, do not fucking. If you see something like, obviously, like I know it's probably different because if your country doesn't have a lot of like exposure outside, like internationally, being famous for something that's like, or being well known for something that's like bad, I can see that. I can see that, but I don't know. That's another reason that I wanted to try and be respectful to the culture. Was for that reason. Like, I don't want to just bring up a different culture entirely in just like to mock it or anything like that. And I try to avoid anything like that. This was also a cool moment where I got to work with Gus, who you probably recognize if you read the comments a lot on this podcast. Fairly frequent commenter and fan of the channel. And I think I mentioned it was like frequent Cellarcast viewer or something like that in the video who reached out to me a little while ago, and so we were just like in touch, I guess. And I looked at, because someone left a comment about, I explained this at the start of the second video, but someone left a comment about how all the author's notes or the writer's notes or the editor's notes, something like that, where they go like full xenophobia, I think was the words he used. And I was like, oh, well, now I'm curious. Racism? And so like yeah, I mean the notes were not translated for some reason by the translation group, so I reached out to Gus. I was like, hey, would you mind helping me out with like translating this thing? Because I don't think it's ever been translated. And he was like very, very happy to help. Shout outs to Gus. Got back to me within like a day or two, something like that, with like the whole thing translated. And he was nice enough to include like annotations to explain certain references and things like that, and basically translator's notes. So awesome job by him. Big shout outs, and I think it led to some great moments and a lot of interesting backstory, and it really helped fill out some of the information about the creators of that book, like Pereira and Peixoto. That was great. I really enjoyed these two videos. I thought they were. I think I really nailed a lot of the comedic timing. I think I nailed like the weird matching. Like when you get to issue 4, and it's just this bizarre tone shift. I think I actually communicated that like it gets so dark, and I feel like that comes across in the editing a lot. And I think I did that. I think I executed that pretty well. I'm pleased with how I was able to do that. And then yeah, the second part, probably just more of that. It was just more of describing my confusion and stuff like that. And I do appreciate what the comic represents as just this like this very like indie publication is what it feels like, and it's cool. Ended up being a lot longer in total. I mean, God, if I put both these videos together, it's like over an hour, like an hour and it's like feature length practically. It's like I made a movie. Yeah, on this, and yeah, I enjoyed it. That's pretty much what I had to say for that. It was a fun romp. I liked expressing my love of Mega Man.